Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I am your host, Paul O'Need, and today our podcast is sponsored by Coach's Corner University. Use code podcast300 to save $300 off lifetime access to our Coach's Corner Education Collective with over 200 hours of continuing education credits and lectures, as well as TC Nutrition, barefoot shoes, and bacon and barbells apparel. You can find those links and codes in the description below. Today, I'm joined by Jeremy Hartman. Jeremy is a teacher, a powerlifting coach based out of Indiana, and we had the pleasure of meeting very briefly in the hallway at the SWIS Symposium. And anyone who's a friend of Ed Cohn is a friend of mine, and I really wanted to get to know him, especially after winning the Lifetime Achievement Award. So congrats on that. Welcome to the podcast.
Awesome, Paul. Thanks for having me so much on here, man. Excited to talk strength and shop with you.
Yeah, so maybe I gave a little quick intro, but I'd love to know a little bit more about you and what your coaching looks like and how you came up in powerlifting.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things about me is I was very fortunate growing up. I had a coach in middle school introduce me to strength training right away. And, at that time, that was kind of seen like you're going to hurt kids' growth. You're going to do this to kids. I mean, there's so many facts, fallacies out there. It's just silly. So I fell in love with strength training right away. It changed my athletics. It changed my, perception with school, academics, you name it. And then it just kind of propelled me, and that person trained me for wrestling. So we're doing all the wrestling, conditioning, calisthenic work along with the strength training on top of that. So that just really propelled me, like, man, this is changing everything. As I got further in high school and got introduced to the barbell movements, 3 years of, different style training, sled work, rope work, calisthenic work, introduction to weight room. You do that for 3 years. You're in this space. So my body ate up the barbell lifts immediately. And I gains that I was making over everybody else. I was looking around like, why aren't these guys doing these gains? Or why isn't this, why am I going up, more than this every single week? And I just fell in love with the process so much that after having a great, successful career with wrestling, I love the lifting in the off season, did it year round. I went and looked at some scholarships for wrestling, but I really wanted to go into competitive lifting. And one of my other wrestling coaches had trained with Louis Simmons. He was a Division I wrestler. He was Vic Voinovich. They did a lot of fighting, early UFC days.
Okay.
Yeah, he got me introduced. He goes, well, hey, let's go full blast into this. And my old wrestling coach actually happened to open up a gym at the same time, and we went full blast into competitive powerlifting. And from there, went on to win 4 national titles at the collegiate level. Was best collegiate lifter my last year. Went into the men's open, won an open national title. Got to travel to 3 different countries to represent the U.S. For
Wow.
lifting. Yeah, thank you. And then the conclusion was 2009, 2010. The highest you can get in our sport of powerlifting is called the World Games. They hold it once every 4 years. And from there, you have to go from the nationals to the worlds, and then you have to be placing at worlds and have a high enough, formula. And then you can go to the World Games. So my last year in 2010 was competing in Taiwan. I got to represent the sport and, the obviously my country and stuff out there. And from that point on, went into the whole strength conditioning field. I mean, I was already in it, but I went dive into the actual coaching part. I've been doing it part time, but started to kind of take over. And we went through competitive powerlifting. I had athletes with sports. I had my competitive lifting team, and we've just been taking off ever since.
That's fucking cool, man. So the so you haven't competed since 2010?
No, that was my last year competing. I think I had done everything that I wanted to do at that point. Obviously, I always want to lift more and have a bigger total and everything.
Yeah.
But I think the coaching side started taking over. I started getting that bug, and to be a competitive lifter and at the highest level, you got to be very selfish. At least I
Mhm.
had to, and that competitive coaching stuff, just seeing the results in others and getting that bug. I think I just kind of hit everything I needed to hit, and then the coaching and having success in others was really taking over. So then I went full steam into that.
Now, so I just recently retired, not really on purpose, but did you go through any sort of identity shift during that period? Obviously, like you're leaving at the top, right? You just competed at World Games, you've won multiple not national championships, you've competed at Worlds, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I'm done. Like, did that shift in identity happen overnight, or was it a process for you?
Yeah, I had some small little injuries during the time and some stuff that was like really holding me back. And just I think the time, the commitment, and looking forward. But yeah, I absolutely do it. I think I still have it today. I still think every now and then my training is going good for a while. I'm like, man, I wonder if I can do this, or if I wonder if I can do this, or let's put a little training cycle together here on this part. So yeah, you absolutely did. I mean, that's why I was training with my kids, and I'd get the thinking about, man, maybe I should do another meet, or I want to train for something, and then something else would come up. So I just honestly think it was God's way of saying, hey, you can keep training everything, but I got another plan for you on this side now.
That's interesting. Yeah, I feel like if I had to go through this transition 5 years ago, I would have been an absolute mess. But I kind of felt the same way as you. I'm like, I was planning on retiring in December anyway, giving it one more go at a big meet, and then packing it in. And that obviously didn't happen. But I think as coaches, it's important to walk the walk. And I think if you haven't been in the shoes of that athlete that you're trying to train, you're missing out on a big piece of empathy. You're missing out on like, hey, I've done what I'm asking you to do. I know it's hard, but you can do it. Like, is that something that you draw on heavily in your coaching practice?
Yeah, I try not to talk too much or brag too much to my athletes. When they do have questions, I'll say something, or I'll bring up they're like, Coach, what'd you do at a time like this? Or, hey, I'm struggling here on this part, whether it's a sport athlete that I'm training or whether it's a competitive lifter. So yeah, I will draw on some of that stuff, and I will talk about some of my experiences during that time. But yeah, you talk about, hey, I had the same feelings here. Hey, I had the same nervousness. Hey, like you're traveling. I got a couple guys actually competing at Worlds this weekend in Iceland for the IPF
Mhm.
championships, and we just talked about the plane ride, what he needs to do getting there, getting his sleep in order. Here's some of the stuff I did that helped me out when I was traveling, and here's some of the mistakes I made too. So yeah, I absolutely do draw on those to certain points, and just make sure that it's clear that, hey, I'm in this for you, and we're on the same team.
One of the things that constantly astounds me lately is the growth of the sport. Like powerlifting when we started. So as you retired in 2010, I did my first meet in 2000. I think I did my first meet in 2010. But I was already in college at that point, or I was already in grad school at that point. But I look at it as like we were competing in high school gymnasiums, and it was such a fringe sport. There was mohawks everywhere, and there were criminals walking on the platform. And now the sport has absolutely exploded. How do you feel about where the sport is right now, and where you think it's going?
Oh, it's tremendous. I mean, the lifts that people are hitting raw. I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
lifts they're hitting in single ply during my time. So I think it's been tremendous growth. I think it's been very good in some parts, and other parts where there's a lot of poor coaching and stuff out there. I've seen a lot of athletes injured, a lot of people that weren't trained right, weren't coached right, and I've seen them burn out of the sport quickly. I've
Oh
seen them
yeah.
get injured. I've seen them a combination of both, where they stopped making gains because they made all these traditional gains, squatting and benching and deadlifting 3 or 4 times a week, and they're not doing the assistance work, they're not doing the other stuff because they just don't know, or they weren't coached that way, or they're getting these great results, and boom, they're burned out, or man, they had a career-ending injury real quick. It's like, what just happened to this person? The guy was on a roll, this girl was on a roll. But yeah, I think it's grown tremendously. The females are doing phenomenal. I got some very strong girls.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's just amazing that the numbers these people are hitting, and we're like, all right, we got to step up even more. Hey, we got to do this, or hey, this person did this. We got to get to this to get to this level now.
Yeah, like to go to a meet back in the day and see a woman pull 400 pounds was astronomical. You're like, oh my God, that's crazy. And now you've got women in like the 115-pound weight class pulling 400 pounds. Like it's absolutely insane. And didn't a female strong woman just pull 727?
There was something crazy out there that I've seen. It's left and right.
Like,
You see something pop up, and then King of the Lifts has got somebody brand new. Like, who the heck is this? Or
yeah, this random person. I love it. I think it's phenomenal because you know if you truly love the sport and you realize, and I'm going to loop this back into what you said about, athlete burnout. If you truly love the sport, I think you realize that the sport is bigger than just the squat, bench, and deadlift. And there's so much more that you can glean from it to apply to the rest of your life. And I think your position, when I was reading your bio, I'm like, this guy gets it because you're involved with young people in their most formative years. So you see this as an opportunity to teach them the lessons that they can learn underneath the barbell that once they leave high school, leave college and go on to the rest of their life and they still have those lessons. I just think about how much that can add in terms of quality of life and the potential success they can see. I'm sure that has to play a role in the way that you program, you coach, you interact with these young people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, with the younger kids, you got, parents and families and stuff you get involved with, especially if they're starting to travel around and compete at nationals. And, you get to be, some of my kids' parents are some of my best friends now. I've known for over 10 years because we've been traveling all over the US and parts of the world together on some of them. But yeah, you always talk about how it relates to this, or hey, if they're getting big with school, or hey, like you talked about even with your graduate school, it's like, hey, I'm moving on to the next level. It's like, well, hey, you just got to step it up a little further. Undergrad's over with, and now you're going to this. And I've had some kids
Mm.
now in medical school, and coach, it's killing me like this, that. I'm like, well, you've been through tough times before and you've gone through adversity before. And you know that you've gone through this before. This is going to be nothing else for you. So we absolutely do reflect on those. And that's something I bring up to my younger kids, as they progress from the middle school to the high school level and high school to college. And even some professional athletes, I get with. You're just always trying to reflect on some of those little lessons. Hey, remember this time you went through this, or hey, this is no big deal compared to what we went through before in this part.
How do you pull them back? Right. That's something that I seem to run into a lot with the younger athletes that I coach. One of them comes to mind. He's so unilaterally driven towards being IPF world champion. And truth be told, I think he could get there. But I know for a fact that if he continues along the mental trajectory that he's on, he will burn out. How do you recognize that within your athletes and maybe pull them back or temper those expectations or maybe shift it to a more long-term view?
Yeah, I got a great story right now. Jared Martin, he's getting ready to compete at the IPF Worlds this Sunday, and he's the first 275 pounder ever to squat 1,003 pounds in single ply gear. Walked out. Jared and
That's that's bananas.
Yeah, he squatted. So he's got the raw record right now. Squatted 866 very easily raw, and then he's got 1,003. Did that at the Arnold Classic just this past year. But he's the guy that I have to actually undertrain a little bit, and I have to remind him because he goes, "Hey, that wasn't bad," or "Hey," I'm like, "Just wait a little bit." Then he's got that, and he's got a bench shirt on. He's benching over 600, and then he pulls
Oh my god.
822. He pulls 822 raw on a stiff bar.
Oh my god. What does he eat?
Well, he was just here for. He stayed with me for last last week to finish his heavy training. He was here for 3 days with me. I'll tell you what he eats because I was helping him with some of the stuff because he had to work from home. So he's sitting at my kitchen table typing on his computer, working from home. But every morning was about a dozen eggs, about a half a pound of beef, and then rice cakes and peanut butter and avocados, get some fats in. He always had some type of a snack, just a simple protein shake and stuff that he'd have. Lunch was, whatever he had left over. I think he brought a rotisserie chicken in. That was his whole, he cut that thing up, and potatoes and rice. That was lunch. Pre workout, he had some sandwiches and stuff that he likes before he goes in. Fruit, and then gets his pre workout and stuff. Drinks and
Yeah.
everything too. And then we get done, and he comes home. He's got a local farmer where he gets a bunch of steaks and ground beef from and everything. So he cooked up a couple steaks, some rice, and had one more protein shake before he went to bed. And that was just a normal day for Jared.
I love that. I love some of the stuff that because I speak with the range of clients that I have is huge. So I have, you know, the CEO who wants to perform at a very high level in his job, and I have, the high level power lifter as well. And when I communicate like to each one of them how the different things they're doing might be quote unquote extreme to the other side, I just find it so funny. You talk about eating a dozen eggs and beef for breakfast. I'm like, oof. That's probably more calories than I eat in a day right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the funny thing was, along with Jared, I had my 23-year-old kid up here, Braden Gulch. He's the junior national champion right now. So he came in, he squatted. Jared squatted 950 for one. That was his last prep before Worlds. Braden came in. He's 23 years old. He's 290. He drove all the way in from Wisconsin. He stayed with me for 3 days too, about a 7-hour drive, and he squatted 800 for three, which was a PR for him. Doing real well. And then, but same thing with him. Like he got to be around Jared and me. He got to see like, okay, like I'm doing a good job with my diet. I'm doing okay, but wow, these guys are really serious. He goes, Jeremy's retired. My coach is retired, and he's still eating clean and getting all his
Mm-hmm.
calories and tracking his stuff. And he goes, I see Jared over here who, he wants to be like, he wants to squat 1,000 someday. And he's like, okay. He goes, wow. He goes, Jared's tracking his food just like he tracks his training. And he goes, okay, I really need to step it up. Like, wow, these guys take it to a whole nother level here.
How do you feel the environment plays into that? Because I think, I know for me, when I So I had competed for about 3 years, 3.5 years while I was in grad school. And then when I finished grad school, I got my first strength and conditioning job. I was commuting 2 hours on the weekend to train at a gym here in Ottawa. And at the time, actually, you might be familiar with the name. So my training partners were Jay Nira,
Hmm.
Cade Weber, and Willie Albert, who at the time all were the number one lifter in their weight class in the world.
Gotcha.
And I was like, being in that environment, there was a point where I had an 800-pound squat and I was the weakest guy in the room.
Yep.
How do you find that plays into, the development of athletes, and how can we kind of manufacture those environments?
Yeah, Paul, I'm glad you mentioned that because too many people want to know about training programs I give out or this or that or what guidelines and not
I
what you
don't
just
care.
well, that's normal people. What are you? How many times a week you squat, or what's your assistance work, or how do you program for this? And what you just said about the environment, I think that takes more precedent than anything else because when I had these guys up here training, I had a bunch of other my HPT athletes who are a couple hour drive away, or they're in Chicago or near me. They all came in because they all wanted to be around each other. These guys were getting ready for Worlds and some other big events. And when you get around all these people and you see what these guys do, and everybody starts redefining, okay, I thought I was dedicated. Oh, this guy drove in 7 hours to train for 3 days. This guy's working from Jeremy's kitchen and he's getting ready to go in there and squat 950 later on. And one thing I tell you, all my sport athletes too, when they go up to the college level, they go to like a Big Ten university. I've had a couple swimmers over there. I've had a couple other athletes and wrestlers too. They say, man, the environment we had here was so much better because it was just that's the way I controlled it. It's one of those things you have to, like Louis Simmons did with West Side Barbell. You got to really control it. It's one of those things that can easily slip away from you. So
Mhm.
hey, my guys might joke around, but hey guys, bring them back in. Hey, it's time to get serious. Or hey, this guy's going for a big lift. Hey, shut up. Get ready for this. Hey, get on the side, spot them. Once you get that, and the kids see, holy cow, like this is a whole new level. And other athletes from sports or powerlifting, you can't beat an environment like that, and people will drive in and people want to be a part of that.
I always relate it back to, when the 4 minute mile hadn't been broken. Then it gets broken, and then all of a sudden it gets broken multiple times right after that. And I think the environment kind of shows you what's possible. Because at the time, when I started commuting to Ottawa from Kingston, it was like I'm competing with guys who are lifting weights that I didn't know was possible. I remember it vividly. I was doing triples at 585 on the deadlift. At the time, for me, that was like
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
And Cade walked into the gym. He had just competed at Raw Unity. He walks into the gym eating a blizzard. Says, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just doing some deadlifts." He goes, "Cool." And he rips a set of 6, stiff leg, no straps, no warm up. Puts the bar down, picks up his blizzard, and goes, and walks away.
I
And
love guys like that, man. That you can't beat that mentality.
no, you can't beat that mentality, and it fires you up. And I was fucking pissed.
Yep.
And that I was training harder than ever after that, and you don't, I said it in jest that I don't care what your training programs look like, because truthfully, there's nothing new, right? Like there's nothing that you're going to put on a piece of paper and I'm going to go, you know what? I never thought of that. But when you're coaching an athlete and you're actually involved in the process, that's where the true magic of programming comes in. Because at the end of the day, it's just numbers on a piece of paper. But your relationship with that athlete, how you understand their body, how you understand the feedback that they're going to give you, that's what allows you to manipulate those numbers on a paper to fit that person. As you've grown as a coach and as you've expanded your coaching practice, how have you transitioned the way that you view programming? Maybe even like not even granular, just like philosophically.
Yeah, everything you just said is huge. That relationship you just talked about. I had a couple wrestlers. We were training for the state championships just a few years ago, and I had two back-to-back state champions, both from the same school, both been training with me for a couple years. And we talked about before they went out. I'm like, hey, am I peaking you for sectionals or am I peaking you for the state meet? Like, coach, well, you're picking us for this. I said, well, we're not going to go easy here. We're going to keep training all the way through this. And then when it gets time, I'm going to rest you guys. And they bought in and they saw that they were a little bit stronger at the end of the season, where in previous seasons, where they were working out at, they were just kind of maintenance. So they didn't feel the best, or, they're like, hey, I went in there feeling good. I'm like, how do you feel? Like, coach, I've never been this strong before. That's what I wanted to hear. You can't pay enough, like you just said. You can't put numbers on a paper, give somebody enough for that. When an athlete tells you that, hey, I trust the way he's going to peak me out, I believe it, and now I see it. I feel great going in. And then when I talk to them afterwards, and like, Coach, that was the best I've ever felt. This is the greatest I've ever felt on this part. That's what you want to hear because they believed in you, they believed in the process, and it turned out the right way for them.
I'm going to assume that no two programs that you write for athletes look the same, but if you could describe your coaching philosophy in a few sentences, what would it be?
Yeah. If anything, I've simplified it. And like you just said, like you're not going to see anything new and anything fancy over this time.
Mm-hmm.
Everything now, if you had to ask me about my philosophy, it's simplified, doing it right, doing it very hard, pushing it when you can, because when you're trained above 90% for a serious strength athlete, that's a whole nother level of training. You can only maintain that and do that for so long. So I think it's simplified. It's like you said, I talk with my athletes, here's what I want you to hit on here. Here's the reasons why. Okay, I'd really like to hit this. Okay, sometimes I got to meet athletes in the middle. If it's going to get them a little bit mentally better, okay, fine. But I need you to do these. Let's compromise here. And hey, it's
Mm-hmm.
a win-win situation. So I think simplified, basic periodization, where I used to get too much caught up in how would I do in this and what. No, I simplified it even more, and we do everything right. And I think our technique is phenomenal. And as you go from like a 500-pound squat to a 600 to a 7 to guys like Jared and those guys hitting 8,000-9,000-pound squats, their technique had to get more efficient. They had to do all the little things even better on there. So I think simplified and more detailed at the same time.
Yeah, and I think people need to hear that because the oversimplification at the lowest level, or sorry, the overcomplication of the process at the lowest level, I don't get annoyed by too much because I usually just let it. I'm like, I don't really care what other people are doing. I know what I'm doing and I know it works. But one thing that I see perpetuated, especially online, as more people are starting to talk about what they do, you get people trying to use a scalpel when what they really need is a chainsaw, right? And I see it all the time with, especially in the bodybuilding space. Barbell rows are not going to build your lats. I'm like, you don't have any lats, so you should probably just build your back.
Yeah.
Um, and in saying that, at the same time, I also don't think enough credence is paid to those high level, high performers, in that when you're squatting 800, 900, 1,000 pounds, the rules of human physiology do not apply. And I'm totally okay to say that because show me a study with 1,000-pound squatter. You can't do it. So, how have you kind of had to adapt your approach when dealing with those poundages that, for all intents and purposes, are superhuman?
Yeah. I think writing stuff out with my athletes ahead of time, you want to have some type of master plan, but you as well as I know, any training program I've ever been run myself through when I was competing or given to an athlete, I've never followed it 100%. No way.
Yep.
Right. Right. My athletes have never, they might have stuck to it, but we've had to make changes on stuff. Stuff comes up. You've got to work around some stuff. You got to change your philosophy sometimes. I'd rather bring an athlete undertrained into a powerlifting competition rather than overtrained. I had to do that with Jared when he squatted his 1,000 pounds at the Arnold. He got a little overtrained there for a little bit because he got a little too excited on some stuff and he went off program a little bit. He goes, well, this was feeling good. So I just went up a little bit here and it started to cost him. So I actually had to dial him back more than normal to catch back up with everything. So those are some of the things with those guys. Like you got to dial it down when you need to. You got to bring it up when you need to. There are times when you need to push through it. There's times in the off season when you need to, you need to push your body like down. You need to push it to limit so it knows it can recover.
Mm-hmm.
So like, no, you can recover through this. Like, hey, this is part of the off season. You're overtrained a little bit now. You're okay. It's not like I'm overtrained when they're going to get injured. There are
Right.
certain times when I'll do that. And there was a time with Jared, and a few of my other athletes when they were getting ready for some serious meets, like during their training, like if they were competing in single ply equipment, there were a couple times where we had to put the equipment on and poke the bear around that 90+% for a little bit, dial it back down, and then we'll ram it right back up for, nationals, worlds, whatever they have going on. It's been a tremendous, tremendous strength gain for everybody.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said ramp up, then ramp down, because what I'm finding more so as my athletes get stronger and stronger is they can recover physically, but that central fatigue sticks around for weeks. So people will say, oh, you can't squat heavy every week. I have some athletes who squat heavy once a month. And how you periodize that out, you mentioned having a master plan, I think is so, so important because if you have a meet 3 months down the line, your quote unquote prep might start now at 16 or 20 weeks out, because you need so much time to push up, pull back, push up, pull back, push up, pull back. And only you're going to know through that communication with the athlete how many times you need to do that, how many exposures to that 90 plus you need to have in order to be prepared. um, but I think you understated in your explanation how much goes into convincing an athlete that they don't have to redline all the time, especially when that athlete is highly motivated.
I mean, you do. You have to talk to them about, because they'll want to go off this, or hey, they'll get a text. Hey, this was easy. If they can't make it in for training, they're one of my distance athletes. Hey, this is easy. Can I go up? I go, no. If you go up now, it's going to affect the rest of your stuff later on. You might think like that 10, 20 pounds. Hey, it's easy today, but we're planning for 4 or 5 weeks from now. You're going to start messing this up, and it's going to start throwing. I'd rather be a little bit easier now because we're looking towards the end goal over here. So those athletes, yeah, I've had to dial them back down. Or when they start getting overtrained, I'm like, well, you're gonna have to do this because we got to make up for this now. Or hey, I'm gonna have to cut some, your assistance work. Or when I've dialed them down, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna dial your main lifts down, but I'm gonna up your assistance work at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Ed Cohen talks about building a suit of armor, so that way when you get into your training cycle, you don't have all these ticks and twinges, and this is really bothering me, or this is still bothering me from 10 weeks ago. So hey, we're gonna ramp up our assistance work here. Main lifts are not taking a backseat, but like you said, maybe they're training the 70, 80% a little bit here, and that'll slowly start to switch and go into as we go through. So some athletes, yes, I do have to hold back. Others, they just need some confidence. So sometimes they do need to hit a heavy single. Sometimes they do that. I have a couple athletes that, man, we get to the intensity and they start, as soon as we hit, they start breaking down. So I actually have to keep their volume up a little bit with maybe some back down sets so they can get their technique right. They can keep it up. So I might have them hit like a heavy single, but then we'll do some back down sets with some volume training over here, because if I push them too hard, they just don't respond to that intensity and they'll start breaking down too soon.
Yeah, I found that as well. I mean, every athlete's different. One of the funniest experiences I ever had is I peaked an athlete for a meet. It was a national level meet, and I didn't have him lift over 80% the whole prep, but I just built volume at 80%. So as soon as he got to decay that fatigue, it was super easy. And I think we ignore sometimes the fact that structure is built submaximally. And if you don't have a structure to support those heavy loads, all of this maximal lifting is kind of for naught. And you see it all the time. I see it more so in tested powerlifting than untested, where guys and girls will hit PRs in the gym and then flounder when it comes to the platform. You're
Yes.
laughing. I would love to hear your thoughts here.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, it drives me nuts because you'll see some of my athletes. Not they don't believe, but they'll be like, "Coach, man, these athletes are hitting these PRs, like you just said. They're hitting this." I'm like, "Just wait to the meet." My athletes, they'll rarely hit PRs in training. We might hit some at the end, when they're getting ready for a meet, the last 2 weeks out when I peak them out. But what you
Mm.
just said there, all these athletes are hitting PRs. It's like every week, this. Then go to a meet, then what happened? And they, oh, the ref, or it just wasn't my day. It's like, no, that happened 5, 6, 7 weeks ago in your training when you were hitting heavy singles and hitting darn near maxes because you thought you could ride this train out the whole time. My lifters don't hit that. And then we go to meets and we go 9 for 9, 8 for 9, maybe a 7 for 9 if we're going for a big PR, something that we needed to win. But we were
Mm.
consistently setting up, and going through. And if you look at my lifters over time, even some I've had for 8, 9, 10 years now, they're still making incremental gains. Where, like you said, those other people, they've fallen off by now.
Yeah, and I think I don't know whether it's a mindset that like I have to get everything out of this meet, because you'll hear like, oh, if you go 9 for 9, you didn't push hard enough. It's like, well, if I go 9 for 9 and set PRs, then doesn't that just mean I'm setting myself up for future PRs down the line?
Yes.
And these are things that I think about after the fact, because I absolutely fell into the trap while I was competing of this is the meet. This is the meet I'm going to get. My best total was 1960. My goal in powerlifting was to total 2000. So I'd be lying if that didn't play into the fact that I took a 2.5 year layoff and tried to come back. Right? I'm like, I have unfinished business. But the reason I have unfinished business is because exactly what you were talking about.
Definitely. I think with those people, I mean, when I train them with everything, they a lot of my lifters have come to see, or when I get a newer lifter, because now I'm attracting some more higher end lifters.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they don't see that, but then they'll get like after they've been with me for a little bit, like, okay, I see how your lifters are going, I see how your training's going, and then boom, they're doing great at the meet, or they're walking away like, oh, maybe they missed this, but do they had 2 PRs, and man, we had a big PR on the total, like you just said, small PRs, but then man, we had a big PR on the total. So even some of my higher end lifters now that I've attracted, they're starting to see that they're like, okay, I don't have to, like you said, max out or do all these lifts or post my stuff like PR all the time. Hey, I can, we call it letting the strength settle, or like slow cooking the
Mm.
strength here, peaking for the meat. They're like, okay, coach, now we see how your programs run. Now we see why we're doing better and why your lifters do better at meets.
How much of your coaching is done in person versus remote?
Um, some of my higher end lifters, they are remote because I've got people, like all around the U.S., some outside the U.S. too. I would say about 30%, those, but they're always coming in. So I got people, when I had uh, my two lifters who were getting ready for big meets. I mean, those guys were staying with me for 3 days. I had a wrestler who I was going to the Olympic trials with. He was coming down once a month to, spend the weekend with me. So I do have a variety of people, probably like I'd say 30-40% there. And the other people are pretty frequent about coming in. Maybe they live an hour or two away, but they'll always make time to come in and get their training in.
Okay. And how many athletes are you working with at any given time?
Recently I've taken some assistant coaches on who are former
Okay.
athletes of mine. Yeah. So right now I'd say with in person, and everybody else I have, sometimes it gets close to 70 people all around.
You know
Um,
what? It's funny you say that because I've found personally that especially if you're coaching training and you're trying to coach it at a high level, handling more than 70 people when you want to be hands-on, you want to have a relationship with them, you want to review all their videos, you can't. The workload is too much and you just can't do what you need to do and then things suffer. But what you said, bringing on assistant coaches is the next best thing, especially if you've trained up those coaches to be kind of little U's.
yeah, definitely. You need that help. I mean, some of my people are just coming in for, just general strength training, and some of mine are just sport athletes that I see all the time. So it's not like high end, and I can handle those guys daily. That's not a problem. We work around stuff if we need to, but then a lot of the higher end ones and stuff, I definitely am connected with. Like you said, I'm talking to them multiple times a week. We're setting up this. They're coming in. Hey, I can make it down this weekend for training. Hey, I can make it in for this. Hey, I got a meet coming up. What weekends are good for you? So I definitely have a very high value. But then the other people I'm seeing, just daily, some are general fitness. A lot of athletes though, competitive lifters, variety of sport athletes too. So we just kind of pick and choose. But some of my ones are really dedicated, and they'll get in here as much as they can because they know when they come down, it's going to be a night and day difference from just regular online training.
And are you like, do you own the gym that you're training out of? Maybe give an overview of like what your business looks like.
Yeah, so I'm splitting it with we have another guy he runs CrossFit on half of his side of the gym, and I run sports performance and kind of the powerlifting on the other side of the gym over here. But no, we started off at the high schools where I was a strength coach at, and the college where I was a strength coach at, and then moved that to my garage. I wanted to kind of get out of the mainstream stuff, and then I just needed more space. I got more people coming in, and I wanted to have a little bit more space for some of the stuff I was doing to accommodate more of my athletes. And then yeah, so we have this gym over here that we train at too.
I'd love to ask, what was the impetus for you leaving the college sector? Because I know what my reasons were. I was yeah, not a great situation to be in, but like for you, what was the reason for leaving college?
Yeah, I mean, I did a little internship in the NFL too with the Cleveland Browns and at the collegiate level. It was just at that level, the athletes are required to be there. A lot of them sometimes are such high end athletes they don't want to be there. You got to find different ways to motivate them, and awards and recognition stuff and challenges and getting guys up to be leaders, and it goes above and beyond, which was great. But then you're talking about the hours, man. You got to travel to the football games, the basketball games. If you're dealing with these sports, you're there supporting them, which is what you're supposed to do at that level, and it was just too much for time and everything. High school level, same thing. Those guys, they don't know anything about lifting, so they're coming in brand new slate, and you can make a tremendous impact. And I kind of want to be the coach where that guy affected me early on, and the other guy, Vic Voinovich,
Yeah.
took over and affected me with the barbell lifts and brought me into powerlifting. But at that level, there's nothing. It's great because you're introducing kids, you're getting stuff motivated. But again, a lot of those kids, unfortunately, they're there to participate. They just want to be part of the team and everything. And you're trying to be serious and you're trying to win. And you will get a lot of kids to buy in. You get a lot of coaches and programs. But at that level, you have to get the coaches to buy in, the athletic department to buy in, the
Yep.
staff. You got a community that you're involved with parents and everything. And I just had more and more higher end athletes kind of asking me for training, and it's kind of that transition. Like, hey, these are the ones that are kind of motivated coming in, or pretty motivated, or extremely motivated, and it gets me even more pumped up. And I want to work with people who really, really want to be the best at what they're doing.
What was the timeline between your end of competing to when your business really started to take off?
Yeah, I was very dedicated. So I got done in 2010 competing. And then 2011, 2014, about 3 or 4 years there. I had some athletes compete, and I was getting a high school program up and running. And my job was I was taking these high school kids who were really going above and beyond, and I was showing these kids and coaches and programs, hey, you can win with these kids. You just got to learn how to coach up and be a more dedicated coach. I don't care how long you've been here, you know. And so I started that, and then more and more people started seeing the success we have. You know, you start winning medals, you go to nationals, you're placing, then you're winning, and then you're getting recognition in the newspaper and the community and stuff. And that just started building up on its own. And then some people started coming in, and my sports programs were doing tremendous. And I had some of my elite level guys coming in for my optional training, and those kids, they saw that, and everybody else was seeing that, and people just started asking for more training. And I said, okay, I started creating a side business with that, and that just started growing organically on its own, and more people started asking for it. Then competitive lifters started doing it, and before all these years, I was developing athletes, and now I'm attracting more and more high end ones. Probably the last 4 or 5 years here, that's been kind of a neat thing to work with because these guys are highly motivated. Like you said, now we have to dial it back. Now we have to work with the relationship, the intricacies. You're being a therapist part of the time too, along with being a coach.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of everything. I just enjoy this new challenge more. So I'm still developing athletes left and right, but now I'm working with higher end athletes. So it's really a neat mix that I greatly enjoy the challenge with.
Oh, I super appreciate the variety. Like, I think if I only had to coach or was only coaching one type of athlete, I think I would get pretty bored. I mean, which is part of the reason why I do the education stuff. I do the mentorship stuff. I have the podcast because I like to do a lot of different things. But I'm always curious to know how people's career trajectories kind of take off. And especially when it comes to building a remote business, a lot of our audience is coaches. And one thing that I always harp on with Coaches Corner University, the coaches that I work with, is you don't have to have a fancy marketing strategy. You don't have to be the best at producing content. You have to be the best coach to the people that you work with.
Absolutely.
And when you can produce results, when you can form fantastic relationships, your marketing is taken care of. Like you seem to have built your business purely on results and referrals.
What you just said there is the number one thing when people ask me about how you build a business, what marketing should I do, how much should I post. That stuff's good and all, but what you just said, if you get people results, and I'm glad you so much say that, and you go above and beyond for them. You know, you show up for their events, you go coach them out. You know, you're showing up early, you're talking with them. Hey, give me a call later. Hey, we'll talk more about this later on. If you give people results and you go above and beyond, they will tell others. That word will spread. I've had people just call me up and like, don't you want to hear the price or how much it is? They're like, no, I just had such a good referral from so and so, and
Yeah.
senior result. I'm like, okay. They're like, yeah, can we start Monday? I'm like, yeah, let me get some time to plug you in and get you on our intake forms and everything. But it's funny how that's grown. If you just treat people right, get them results, you do, and then go above and beyond. You know, I show up at some of my athletes' sporting events. I was at the Olympic trials with my wrestler. You know,
Oh,
he was
cool.
his other guys. Yeah, I got to go to Penn State University and be in his corner for the Olympic trials. So when you do stuff like that and you're taking time off, people see that and they want to be a part of that. And those guys are like, man, you were showing up for this, or man, we saw you supporting them all the way through this. Like that's the type of person we want in our corner too.
Well, listen, that's one thing I actually have a conversation with a lot of the powerlifting coaches that I work with. They're like, should I charge my client to go to his meets or her meets? Like, I'm like, no, no, absolutely not. If you're traveling a great distance, get your expenses covered, right? Get your hotel paid for, your travel, that sort of stuff. But I guarantee you, if you're doing a great job and that person represents your company and in your business in a positive manner, you're going to leave that competition with more business. So I think to me, that's investing time into marketing. Not only that, I think that client who you show up for and you're present for, keyword is present, not in the room, but in the room, they're never going to leave. Right? Like you mentioned, you have some clients that you've been working with who've been with you for 9, 10 years.
Yep.
It's really easy to build a coaching practice when you never lose clients.
Yeah, and when you have a good retention rate, they're going to talk good about you. I had a couple of mine competing at the USA Powerlifting Nationals and Powerlifting American Nationals, and they were interviewing like, "You've been with your coach for how long?" They're like, "No, that's kind of common. Like Coach Hartman's got a lot of people around him for many years, and they're still getting results, and he's still helping them maximum. Like, why would I go anywhere else?"
Mm-hmm. You hit on something there. So how do you feel about the splintering of the sport, especially on the drug-free side? It used to be just IPF, but now in the US, I'm not actually familiar with the full story, but USAPL is no longer associated with IPF. It's on kind of on its own, and then Powerlifting America is the new federation. Am I correct?
Yep.
What's the story there, and how has that kind of affected what it is that you do?
Yeah. So you had USA Powerlifting. That was the gateway to the IPF. That was
Hmm.
the standard and everything. There was stuff before that with USPA back in the day and everything else. And then it goes back to the whole political side, which we could have a whole nother conversation about all this stuff. But then they split, and Powerlifting America is the new gateway to the IPF. So if I have athletes that are serious about making world teams and they want to go to that level, then they go the Powerlifting America route. USA Powerlifting still has some great competitions. They're still in the Arnold. Their nationals is bigger. It's hard because I have people on both ends over here on this side. I have some people that compete in some other federations, but I had a couple athletes that, hey, I want to really make a world team. I want to travel. I want to really put myself out there against the best athletes from around the world, where the most world competition is. Well, said then simple as this: we go over here and you got to win, you got to show up, and you got to go. This year is the year of the World Games, and I was talking with Jared and a few other of my lifters, and if he's got to go out there, he's got to place top 3 at IPF Worlds, and then he'll qualify to go to China later on for the World Games. And I said, if this is some of the stuff you need to check off, then you need to check off on this, man. So we're going to support you all the way through, and I'm going to coach you all the way through, and we're going to make sure you get on the world team, get out there top 3, and go on to World Games and do the best we can. So it was just a split in federations. Whatever my athletes want to do. If they want goals to make a world team, or they want to go over here and compete, I talk with them, and hey, I'm going to support you. Let's just go out and break records.
Does do you find yourself kind of guiding people more towards that world level competition, or are you still like, for me, if I was to put myself in a young lifter's shoes and I wanted to compete against the best people in the world, I think it'd be kind of a no brainer to go Powerlifting America, or Powerlifting USA, and then go to the IPF. Like, why would anyone consider USAPL now?
They just have, they're in the Arnold, they're at the Nationals, they have the bigger events still. Powerlifting America is still growing federation. So some
Mhm.
people want the overall competition over here. They got over 1,000 people at their nationals, but the higher end lifters are, like you said, they're wanting to go to the worlds and everything. So it's where they want to go. Some people like, hey, I want to win a title over here. I have some unfinished business on this side. Some people obviously, like, I'll give you an example, like the IPF, like the women's weight classes. I think
Mhm.
it goes from below 200, and then all of a sudden it's just heavyweight and beyond that. And they're like, well, I'm only 210 pounds. I'm not going to cut down to 190 to try to make this. So the USAPL's got a little bit more competitiveness on this side. So some of them will go over there because they want to win a title over there. There's more people on that. Some people with the high school and collegiate nationals, they want to go over here. But like you said, the higher end lifters, if they're trying to make worlds and they want to compete against best in the world and actually travel and go out for a world title, compete against these guys, see what it's like, then we'll push them towards Powerlifting America and be the best we can be over there.
I love it. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you faced as a coach?
Biggest challenges is as athletes grow. I'll tell you one is when they're going. A lot of my higher end high school athletes, if they were making like some sub junior world teams and getting to travel and compete, and then they get to the college level, that is a big difference when they are switching over from high school to college. And then there's a lot of change because hey, you had 18 years of mom and dad security. And now all of a sudden you're off on your own over here, and you still got to be connected with me, and we still have a high expectation on that side. So some of those kids just take a little bit of time going on to that level. Some of the kids when they're again that transitioning part, when I'm like, hey, you can compete at nationals. Hey, you can place. Hey, now you can compete and maybe make a world team. Like we got to step this up even more. So you have to show them like, hey, you got to be more serious about your diet. Hey, there's no more optional workouts. You need to come in. You need to do this stuff on your off day. Here's what I need to get done over here. So I mean, a lot of them get excited about that, and they're all bought in, because they're winning
Mhm.
nationals, and they might have a chance to make a world team or go above and beyond, or hey, these are little things you need to do, or there was a big seminar with Ed Conan I did one at Crown Point, and I told my younger lifters, you guys are starting to understand this, and I'd introduce them who Ed Conan was. You know,
Oh,
I know
that kills me.
I know we don't have the powerlifting magazines anymore and the stuff and the stuff that's out there. But once they understood that, I'm like, you need to come up here. You need to have him look at you. This is an easy seminar. Ed and I are putting it on together. You need to get coached by somebody else on this part. So just I think stepping up to a new level, then realizing they have to do it a new way. My 23-year-old who's coming up, I mean, he's going to be 900-pound squatter soon, and he's had to step it up. And he saw the way Jared was training. He saw the way that I demand stuff out of him. When tell him like, hey, you need to get down here for this. Hey, you need to hold that off. I know that's important, but this is more important for your meet coming up. So it's just redefining themselves at new levels. I think it's a neat challenge more than a difficulty. Some of the people at the lower levels, they might not realize the potential that I see in them yet. So I have to make them aware of those certain qualities that they have to get better.
What do you think is some good advice for a coach who's looking to stand out? Like someone who, just like we've talked about, is driven to provide high level service, is driven to create those relationships, but is just getting started. I feel like now more than ever, the coaches, I use coaches in quotation marks, who are simply famous on social media or maybe have one viral lift or have been very high level competitors themselves are now offering coaching. What's your advice for young coaches who are trying to stand out even though they don't have that, insta clout to fall back on?
I think what you just said before about, hey, you got to go to these meets with your athletes. You got to go up there and you got to spend time with them. You got to go above and beyond. And when people see me or, my crew showing up, at meets and stuff, they see like how dedicated we are, how technical we are, how I go above and beyond, how excited I get for my athletes when we're smashing PRs or winning or pulling the last deadlift to win. I think when people start seeing that all around, even I've had, I'm like, when people call in for me, like, well, I'm like, where did you come from? Or who referred you? Like, oh, we just saw you to meet, or hey, so-and-so saw you to meet and they're good friends. And they just said like, your girls are doing amazing. I got these girls over here that we want to train, or, hey, we saw the way you were handling these people. So I think that you got to go to all these meets. You got to make yourself stand out. Your lifters have got to show out. Your lifters got to talk great things about you too, because people are going to ask, hey, where do you train at? Or when I was at meets, I'd invite people to come down like, hey, some higher end lifters or some decent lifters, hey, just come down and train with us for a little bit. There's no charge. Just we'd love to have you come in here and train. I think when
I
people
love
start
that.
seeing that, yeah, I think when people start seeing that, and like you said about the whole referral thing, like, yeah, I went down to Jeremy's. I didn't know what to expect, but man, he fixed a few things. Like, man, he's a really good coach. I think we're looking to coach
Hmm.
with him, or they'll invite. Can I bring so and so down with me next time? We'd really like to have you look at this lifts over here. So it's neat how that grows in. Like I just had when my lifters were in here getting ready for IPF Worlds. I had Mary. I can't pronounce her last name. Mary Thizpin. She was fifth in the Olympic Games for Olympic weightlifting. Just
Okay.
yeah, and she squats like I saw her squat 529 raw. I mean, just Olympic style squat. She clean and jerks in the upper 300s. I saw her from the rack. I saw her push jerk, or excuse me, rack jerk. She did over 400 pounds. I
Oh
mean,
my God.
yeah. I mean, she was fifth in the Olympics for the U.S. and
For a reason. Yeah.
yeah, for a reason. Yeah. So she was like down there with my lifter. She stood and watched like Jared squat 950 and a couple of other guys. She goes, "This is freaking awesome." And she was asking me some stuff. Like she's in between training right now. She goes, "Hey, can you?" She goes, "I want to learn how to sumo deadlift. I want to learn how to bench press." And she goes, "It's not like she's going away from the Olympic lifting, but she goes, I want to learn some stuff." And I just had a girl come in. She's the Indiana University throws coach for girls, Megan
Yeah.
Tomey. She's getting ready for a strongman meet. And she goes, "Hey, I'm getting ready for a meet." She goes, "Can I come in and have you look at my deadlift? I saw how you were helping your other lifters." And she goes, "I want that intensity." So 2 days later, she shows up at my gym, drove 45 minutes, and rips up a PR 455 pounds for 3 reps on a stiff bar. And I think the girl only weighs 200 pounds. And again, this is what I mean. When they saw me interacting with my lifters in the gym,
Hmm.
they saw me helping them out. They saw me, asking them for help. They saw me coaching a few people. And then all of a sudden, I got 2 lifters from that are coming down to train with me. One was fifth in the Olympics. The other one's a Division One throws coach getting ready for a strongman event. And all of a sudden, I got 2 more people just like that who are at a high level.
I love it. The next question, like I have to ask, so you've been in this for so long. I'm sure the amount of education that you've undertaken is quite extensive. How have you attacked your continuing education from, just being a high level athlete now to running a successful coaching business?
Yeah, my continuing education. I think, we just talked about, like Ken Kanakin says at the SWIS seminar, like when I met you in the hallway,
Hmm.
the good stuff is out there. So like I sat down and talked with Ed. I said, here, I got some lifters on this part. Here's what I'm having some trouble with. What do you think? Or, hey, here's my programming on some of these higher end lifters. We're getting ready for some meets. What am I missing here, Ed? What do you think I should do differently? And Ed would talk about a certain things on that. I talked with Dave Tate. Dave Tate had he went through a couple pec tears before. And I asked Dave, hey, I got a couple athletes that came into me. One came to me with some soft tissue work. I said, Dave, what did you do for this? What was some of your rehab? I know you dealt with this in the past. And he goes, oh, I got some easy fixes on this. And Dave was talking about, reverse band press for 100 reps. I go, what? Reverse band bench press for 100? He goes, you'll get blood in there. You'll get such a pump like you won't even get. Because if you had to ask me how I rehabbed it, one of my tricks, if you want to say, one of my go-tos was this. And he goes, and I kept it out through my bench training. He goes, that's how I was able to get back on my benching over 600 pounds again. So I think just going to these lifters and not being afraid, like, hey, I got this problem, or hey, what are your thoughts on this? Or hey, I remember you saying something about this. or hey, here's my training cycle. What do you think about this? Or I'll flip open a couple of videos. Hey, what about this part? I talked with Dr. Ken Kanakin. I said, hey Ken, I got one girl. She got some soft shoulder issues going on. What do you think I should do over here? And he gave me some rehab stuff that I should maybe consider doing besides the old banded, external rotation
Mm-hmm.
and everything silly that we all know. And Ken gave me some stuff to look in and do and popped me some videos on there. So I think it's just really looking again at our resources around, taking advantage of it and not being afraid at this stage to still go ask these guys, hey Ed, hey Dave, hey Ken. I talked with a few other people over there. Talked with Dr. Mario. Mario's very good with the blood flow
Oh
restrictions.
yeah.
Yeah. So Mario, I took him to the airport. I took him and Ed. And the whole time, I didn't need to talk about me. I said, Mario, I said, tell me about what you're doing. What's the research on this? How's it helping out? Is it rehab? Is it strength? What are you noticing? And Mario talked for the full 40-minute drive to the airport about everything he was doing and told me to hit him up later and he'll tell me even more about it.
He's been friggin' awesome. I pulled him aside after I went to his talk and just kind of told him it was pretty funny. So I'm like, man, I really enjoyed your talk. I've been using blood flow restriction in my rehab for quite some time. And he's like, oh yeah, like what are you rehabbing from? I'm like, oh, 15 weeks ago I tore both my quads. And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, 15 weeks ago I tore both my quads. Like, you're not limping. I'm like, no, leg pressed 5 plates yesterday for 15. Like, I'm doing pretty good. He goes, we need to talk. And he sat with me for an hour and just talked. And
Yeah.
that's one thing, like just even reaching out to people, like cold reach outs to experts that you respect. To me, it's a sign of respect when someone comes to me and is like, hey, I'm having a problem. Can you help me solve it? I have all the time in the world for somebody who is open to asking for help. And I think people forget that.
Well, Paul,
Like,
one thing I had to educate one of my young lifters on. She was recently at IPF Worlds. She got to go to Malta, so she was on the sub junior, which is 19 and under world team.
mhm.
And so, she's done very well in the United States. And, we went over to Powerlifting America. She qualified, got to, win nationals over there, got to go to Malta, finished top 10 in the world. They had over 20 girls from around the world. And she goes, holy cow, like, she goes, coach. And she did okay out there. She, said a little bit of PRs on some stuff, but it was her first world experience. And it
Yeah.
was like a whole new level of definition. She goes, well, what do I do? I said, well, what are you doing right now? She goes, well, I'm, upset about my performance. I could have done this. I really wanted top 5 was my goal out here. And I said, well, what are you doing right now? And she goes, well, I talked to several of the girls, who were doing real well. Or she goes, actually, the Canadian national team, she goes, their technique was phenomenal. And she was telling me about a few of those girls. And then the girl who won her class was the all around, best lifter. I said, well, you need to go around and you need to make friends with all those girls that you're pissed off about right now. And like
Mhm.
I just said about taking advantage of our situation, here's a young girl, she's 18 years old. I said, go down there, talk to them about their training. What are they doing? What's their training program like? How do they prepare for worlds? What's some of their favorite assistance work? Hey, can you send me some of your training? I said, these are the things that I did early on in my career, when I was trying to be a better athlete because I was pissed like you are. So I'm sitting here, I
Mhm.
didn't make the podium my first year. I took 4th place. I mean, I took 4th place by 2.5 kilos. I said,
Oh,
yeah, I lost to Andreas Helmvit from Norway. So I made him become my friend. I made him email me some of his Microsoft Excel programs. I
yep.
wanted to see how he was training. I talked to some of the Japanese and Asian lifters. They're very technical on the bench press. They're not very massive, but man, their technique is flawless. So I talked to a few about their guys about how they warmed up, how they did stuff differently. I learned about putting boards on your back to help actually reinforce and create a better arch, all because I took advantage of my situation. I told my lifter that, and she went down there and took advantage. She goes, hey, I talked to these girls. She goes, wow, that's a different style of training than what I've heard of. Or, man, this girl doesn't do this, or this girl does do this, which was interesting. I got 2 different perspectives over here. So like you just said, you took advantage of, Dr. Mario with what you've been doing. He sat down and talked with you. She got
Mhm.
advantage. She took along with some of those people. The coach from Norway, Detmar Wolf, when I was competing, I got sick of losing to people from Norway. Enough was enough. And he started sending me some Norwegian programs, gave me some ideas, and actually coached me before online training was available. Was coaching me with some Norwegian programs that I was learning about how they trained, how they warmed up, how they prepared differently, and that gave me a whole new perspective too.
I think I think what it comes down to is insecurity. I think you think if you're unable to ask for help, I think it comes down to being a little bit too insecure, especially as a coach, right? Because if you say to your athlete, "Hey, I want you to go learn from these other people. I want you to go," the thought process is, well, if they learn from that other person, they're going to leave me and go work with them. Was that something that ever crossed your mind?
No, because I want my athletes to be the best, man. It only shows me when my athletes do better over here.
Amen.
Yeah, but I always give credit. When I talked with Ed, I said, "Hey, Ed gave me these ideas. Ed gave me the 10-second squats over here. Ed actually programmed some dynamic work. Ed gave me some different tempo stuff." So I mean, I always give homage and I pay that forward to what they do stuff. But absolutely not. It's only going to make my lifters and me look better in the end. So why would I? Yeah,
100%. I actually had a lifter go over to Malta this year as well. It was his first experience, Junior Worlds, and he qualified. He won nationals. He goes over. We're having a conversation, and I was like, how do you feel about getting ready for this competition? Uh, and he's like, it's weird because I know I'm not going to win. And I was like, probably. Like, you're probably not going to win. I mean, your nomination was 100 kilos lower than the top nomination. Because in that junior 120 class, I think the top nomination was like 910 kilos, which is just bananas.
yeah.
Anyway, and
Junior
he
class.
qualified with an 800 kilo nomination. I was like, yeah, but how do you feel about it? He's like, I'm going to go do my best. And I know that I'm going to be back next year and the year after and the year after. And all I have to do is just keep doing my best. And that was probably one of my biggest wins as a coach, to have an athlete understand that long-term mentality. And what he actually did without me enticing him to do it is he made friends with all those top guys. And now he's chatting with them and asking them what they're doing. And he was actually pretty surprised to see that what they're doing isn't different than what he's doing. They've just been doing it a little bit longer than him because he played junior hockey. So he played junior hockey till he was like 19 and then transitioned over to powerlifting. He's 21 now. Um, and they've been powerlifting since they were 15. So he's like, well, you're just a few years behind. And look, open worlds is what counts. So you've got a ton of time to catch up. Um, was there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to? I feel like we touched on so much.
Yeah, yeah. No, I got some real good. I've had some real good people from my youth program that have been all the way through that I've seen from the youth, the high school, the junior, now open, that are still doing great. I got she just turned 14 right now. This is one that we're going to probably take over and look for worlds later on. She's 14 years old, and it's funny. I had Jared and Braden throwing their bench shirts on and hitting over 300 kilos, 660 pounds, and she's over there 130 pounds benching 175 as a 14-year-old
What? As a
girl.
14-year-old?
Yeah, yeah. She just squatted 303 in training. I wouldn't let her go above that. Like, I'm letting her peak out for the meet. She has certain standards I let her hit. Like when we talked about training
Yeah.
programs, like, hey, you can hit this in training, but nothing more. Hey, save it for the meet. She just pulled 308 for me. But it's funny because they're looking at all the guys benching 600 and taking all the plates off, and she's benching 175, and she was stealing the show. So I think one thing with my
I love
athletes,
that.
yeah, yeah, she's a stud, man. But one thing with my athletes, I think with development, is what you're talking about is how, hey, yeah, you were 100 kilos below this, but look where you're at. Number one, you made the team, okay, and like you
Yeah.
said, hey, we got years and years to develop. So when I had this, some of these young athletes come in, especially lifters, I'm like, I tell their parents, I tell everybody else, hey, I don't care, we're not rushing this. Like we're doing this. Like, no, I don't care what this person is. Hey, I know this record's here, and you really want to hit that, and you're close, but that's not what's in the cards today. I said, if I burn you out now or injure you, I said, you're going to hate this sport. You're not going to achieve those marks. Like you talked about your lifter going to the junior and the open level now later on. Hey, these guys have been doing it longer. So same thing. I think I brought my athletes along really well. A lot of them are, injury free, or, you're going to have little things here and there. It's you're at a high level, but major injury free after 10 plus years of training and still competing at a high level. So I think it's taking the process slow cooking the strength, as my good friend Mark Garrett likes to talk about it, and you hit certain benchmarks and they're allowed to go up. If their technique falters, I'm like, yeah, you hit that, but your technique was here. So I said, no, you're going to go back down. We're going to play around with this percentage until I see it good, and then I'll let you ramp it back up. So I think that's one thing that stood out as me, is just the development of my lifters over many, many years and still doing well.
I got one more question about that because I haven't had the opportunity to speak with a coach who deals a lot with youth athletes. Have you seen the kind of dark side of social media playing into the way these athletes develop?
Yes, but my athletes get to be around, like those younger guys and girls, especially like Claire, my little 14-year-old, was talking about. She gets to be around my older athletes and see that they're all good people. They're all very successful in life too. They got good businesses, they got good degrees, they got good jobs, good careers, good families. So some of the ones that I haven't had, like I had her right away. Like her dad brought her in, like, hey, my daughter is, during COVID, I got her lifting. She's pretty good.
Yeah.
I said, bring her in. I said, I didn't think anything of it. And then we trained her for a meet and everything. But Not on my end, because I get those athletes early on and they get to see around my other good lifters, and my other good lifters talk to them and they get bought in. They know, like, yeah, the other stuff's out there, but this is the way and it's working for me. So I haven't seen it too much on my end with the youth lifters. Now, some of my sport athletes that come in, they will say that, hey, what about this? Or, hey, this guy's doing this. Or, I saw this on, social media with everything. So yes, I've seen that in some of my sport athletes, but my youth lifters, I get them bought in early enough and they're around some of my great athletes and my really good ones, and they just kind of learn the process. Like, this is just the way it is around here. This is the environment around here. This is the way I got to train around here. I got to take advice from this person, or I'll tell my youth lifters, hey, go talk to Shelby Morris, go talk to Jenica Baldridge over here, go talk to so and so. Or I'll tell my other lifters, hey, would you mind going talking to Claire about this? Remember when you went through some of this stuff too? So they get to be around all that. So I keep them kind of in that close knit environment where they know that this is the spot to be at.
Yeah, it sounds like environment plays a huge role in kind of limiting those, I guess fallbacks would be the best word for it. And I think a lot of people are missing out on that, because one thing I noticed there, when we came up, it was very much like you train with a crew, right? You train with your group of guys or girls, and you're always in there training together, and you kind of hold each other accountable. But what I'm seeing now is no one shares racks anymore. No one is, no one is working in with one another, spotting each other. It's very much, for all intents and purposes, a solo sport. Um, how do you feel about that?
Paul, I grew up in the early 2000s and went down to West Side Barbell a lot. And even though Louie and those guys competed in multiply in a different level of powerlifting than I did, with most of USA Powerlifting on my side, what I noticed, and this goes back to what you said, I still am so excited you brought it up about the environment stuff. I saw those guys training, cheering each other on. They had 6 or 7 coaches for one guy every time they would squat. And I was like, man, even though I had to train with the secondary group when I was at Westside Barbell,
Of
I had to
course.
spot load and change all that stuff for all those guys. But I saw what it was, how important it was for those guys to do that. So that's still something that I hold on to up here. And when lifters come in who have been, they're like, hey, I saw, you have a lifting gym. I'm in town for this. Can I come up and train at your place? The number one thing they say is, man, like, you got a good group of people, man. Everyone's supporting each other. Like, everyone's taking it very seriously. They're like, whether it's my sport athletes or my lifters, like, they're like, wow, like, I'm used to people kind of messing around or kind of doing their own thing. Like, you guys are all kind of lifting the same thing. And hey, this is kind of a squat day. Hey, this is pretty much everybody's kind of benching on this day. So I think it's a forgotten art. I think it was something I got exposed to early on that I knew the importance of when you have all those people around you coaching you like a crew when I was down at Westside. And
Mm-hmm.
that was something that, man, I still get fired up with today. And I try to promote as best I can. So in my group, it's huge. But like you said, when you get out and, mainstream powerlifting, people aren't sharing racks or, hey, I got another hour on the bench press till I get done. It drives me nuts and people don't get as well as they could. And I think it's something that's holding people back.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's something that's missing, and I think more people would benefit from just seeking out being around other people. Um, I saw it a lot. Like, we lived in Houston for the winter last year, and the gym we were training at had like 9 combo racks,
Mm-hmm.
and at one point they were all filled with one person. And I was like, "What is happening here? Like, aren't you guys friends?" Like, anyway, I want to be mindful of time here, and I do have a couple quick hit questions. So the first thing that comes to your mind: what is the scariest lift you've ever done?
Scariest lift that I've ever done. Man, it was probably just I think it was my squats, honestly, because that was the number one thing that I was always, man, I could bench, man, I could deadlift. I was mentally prepared, but as squatting, I think it's just I never had the great success that I wanted to. So it
Mm.
was always like, I had to get over that fear, had to get over that fear. And I think I'm going to tell you, 600 pounds felt the same as 700 pounds. It felt the same as 750 pounds. It all felt heavy. And my
Yep.
listeners say that stuff. I'm like, it's just going to feel heavy. I said, I got to a certain point where everything, I just knew it was going to feel heavy and I had to deal with it and learn to overcome that fear.
That was one of my issues with when I first started doing like RPE training. I'm like, everything over 600 is a 10. Like, how? This doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
What's the most proud moment you've had as a coach?
Proud moment just seeing like 30 time deadlifts when my athletes were on the line and a record was on there, a placing was on there, a winning event, a making a world team, a winning a college national title, which has happened tremendously. And I was obviously a great deadlifter, and I had to have a lot of stuff where that last deadlift was to place, to win, to finally make the podium at Worlds. For best lifter, just something on there, and that was something I passed down to a lot of my athletes, even if they weren't very good. mechanically built for deadlifting. I think that third attempt deadlift, when we've had a lot of times where that a majority of time we come out winning, it's because of, I think I just tried to pass that mentality down to all my lifters.
I love it. And if there was one person that you would like to see me interview on the podcast, who would it be? The caveat being is you have to help me get them on.
Okay. Well, have you had Ed Cohen on yet?
I have had Ed. Yeah.
I know, I know.
He's actually the most downloaded episode is Ed.
I know, I know. You know what I think is my lifter Jared Martin. He's not a very good social media guy. So you got 1,000 pound, drug-free squatter in the 275 pound weight class and a 866 raw squatter too. He's just not a big social media guy, but he is very intelligent when it comes to his training. He's very intelligent when it comes to his nutrition, for peaking out stuff. And when you look at it, you're like, well, what was the difference between 8 and 900 or 7 and 800? He will tell you all the little technical differences that he made along the way. Where again, you and I talked about where people want this programming, where I've seen the same crap over and over again. He'll tell you like, well, I had to do this differently, or when I got stuck here for a while in the 700s, I had to do this to break up, or hey, I switched this up over here, or hey, I was using too much of my quads on this, I wasn't sitting back into my lifts enough. Hey, in my off season, I was catering too much to my strengths and not enough to my weaknesses. So I think he's got a great story to tell about just the way he has progressed it all the way through. Instead of giving you, I use this percentage, or I use this Chico program, or I squatted 3 times a week. No, he will tell you about all the little technical differences all the way through his lifts that made him to setting his world records.
It would be really cool if we did the three of us. We could go through like his programming and how you guys interact together to get him to where he was. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Because I need to keep him on track at certain times. Because he's the over motivated, too excited.
Yeah.
If I leave him alone, he'll get into trouble.
Oh, yes.
Don't tell him specific numbers to hit. Like, you cannot go above this. And I'll leave him alone. He'll go above that. So yeah, so it'd be great because we could have a good camaraderie between all of us.
All right, let's put that in the books. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me. I'll have links to where everyone can find you in the show notes. But if there was one parting word of wisdom that you had for the audience, what would it be?
You said a lot of great stuff, Paul. I'm going to be honest. I think it's the insecurity part. I think it's insecurity that you got to get from a coach. Like you said, a lot of them are insecure. They won't do that stuff. They won't call those people. And like you and I said, the people we've talked to, maybe we've had to call them a few times. They will sit down and talk because it is a tremendous thing when people come up to me and ask me. I will try to take as much time as I can to invite them in, explain stuff to them. And I think the insecurity, like you said about an athlete, they want to train their own way. I've invited people in who, they did, well, I kind of do this, or I have my own way of doing stuff. I'm like, yeah, but I've got all these great lifters. Like, you could learn so much. I'm inviting you in. Come on. No, I kind of do, or maybe I'll stop in. So I think the insecurity as a coach, you got to leave it. And I think the insecurity as an athlete, you got to leave it as well. I think those are two big things that people need to get over, and you'll be amazed how many doors open up for you.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me and the audience. And everyone, please make sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And we'll catch you on the next one.
All right. Thanks.